So the battle over the Texas border just got even more complicated. Even though the Supreme Court issued a 6-3 order, now we have another state, the state of Iowa, and their immigration law, which was recently halted and is now going to impact what is going on in Texas. Now, really quick before we jump into this video, I want to ask you guys for a huge favor. Looking at some of my analytics, about 60% of all my viewers are actually not subscribed to the channel. So consider subscribing to the channel. That does help the channel to grow. And then also click the notification bell. I know a lot of people aren't aware of that. If you click the notification bell and turn on all notifications, it helps to ensure that YouTube actually sends you these videos. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we need to talk about how multiple decisions are now impacting this issue over the Texas border and the dispute between the Biden administration and the state of Texas. Things are getting even more complicated, not only because of the Supreme Court's recent orders on this issue, but also because you have the state of Iowa and their recent law, which is almost identical to the state of Texas, that was just ruled on by a federal district court, putting a halt even on that Iowa law. This issue of the Texas border law is currently in the hands of the Fifth Circuit, and multiple Supreme Court decisions on two-way topics, and now even this lower court decision on the Iowa immigration law is being submitted to the Fifth Circuit to influence their decision. So this is very important, and we need to talk about what is happening. Now, if you're not aware how this kind of developed, Texas SB 4 effectively makes it a crime for an individual to violate federal law by crossing into the state of Texas at any location other than a lawful point of entry. It also makes it a further crime, and it allows the state of Texas to enforce the federal laws when someone illegally re-enters when they've already been found and removed once before. It also gives some power to the state judges there and some of the federal judges there to enforce federal laws against these individuals and require that they have to return where they came from. This Texas law was challenged by the Biden administration, and a federal district court on review issued a preliminary injunction which prevented the state of Texas from enforcing all of SB 4. That lower court in that case placed a universal preliminary injunction on SB 4, and it broadly blocked the enforcement of that entire law. Texas then appealed the granting of that universal preliminary injunction up to the Fifth Circuit, and in response, the Fifth Circuit issued an administrative stay on that lower court universal order. Now, various cases after that dealing with this Texas issue were then consolidated, and then at that time, multiple plaintiffs, including the Biden administration, then filed for Supreme Court emergency intervention. They asked for the Supreme Court to step in early and remove the Fifth Circuit administrative stay that was put in place that effectively allowed SB 4 to still be enforced and put in place by the state of Texas. Well, then we received an order from the Supreme Court, and they denied that Biden administration request to vacate that administrative stay. Now, interestingly, even though we got a win from the Supreme Court on that emergency intervention, then what happened is the Fifth Circuit on their own issued a new order, and they removed their own administrative stay. And effectively, that allowed the Biden administration to still get a temporary win and halt the enforcement of that Texas SB 4 law. And then just a few days after that, the Fifth Circuit heard oral arguments on whether or not they were going to side with the Biden administration, find that SB 4 should be joined, should be blocked, or were they going to side with the state of Texas and find that SB 4 is valid and is not unconstitutional. Now, after those arguments, the Fifth Circuit is now set to rule on this case. We are waiting for their decision. But since then, since those arguments, a lot of other decisions and a lot of other precedent from the Supreme Court to other federal district courts have been submitted to the Fifth Circuit to try to sway their decision. One of the most recent developments was a decision in a federal district court dealing with a very similar Iowa state law, which is almost identical to Texas SB 4. In Iowa, the state passed Iowa Senate File 2340, and that law, again, is very similar to Texas SB 4. The Iowa law was challenged by the Biden administration in a case called the United States versus the state of Iowa. And recently, the federal district court judge reviewing that issue granted the Biden administration their request for a preliminary injunction. So again, very similar to what the federal district court did in the Texas SB 4 case. And in that decision, the Iowa district court judge stated that under binding Supreme Court precedent, Senate File 2340 is preempted in its entirety by the federal law and thus is invalid under the Supremacy Clause of the United States Constitution. The court therefore grants the motions for preliminary injunction filed by the plaintiffs in those related cases and enjoins the enforcement of Senate File 2340 pending further proceedings. That ruling by U.S. District Court Judge Stephen Locker sided with the DOJ, and it cited the Supremacy Clause of the United States Constitution that states that the Constitution and federal laws and treaties take precedent over conflicting state laws. The Iowa immigration measure, according to the judge here, is preempted in its entirety by the federal law and that it's invalid. Also in that opinion, he went on to state that as a matter of politics, the new legislation might be defensible, but as a matter of constitutional law, it is not. So he maybe is saying he agrees in theory with what the law is trying to do, but he's saying under the Constitution, he does not believe a state like Iowa can do this. Now, this Iowa decision is very important, not just because this law here is almost identical to the Texas SB4 law, but you have another federal court dealing with this issue, issuing a decision, and now this case is being appealed up to a different circuit court, the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. Interestingly, you have the district court judge in the Texas SB4 case who told all the parties in this Texas lawsuit that they should submit to the 5th Circuit panel for the review this Iowa decision. In the Iowa case, there was a notice of appeal, so there was an appeal up to the 8th Circuit, but then we got an order and a judgment from the 8th Circuit essentially that one of the petitioners, one of the Iowa individuals, did not actually respond appropriately to the appeal, did not file something accordingly, so that appeal was dismissed. And one of the weird things with that is you still have another petitioner in Iowa who seems to be filing for an 8th Circuit appeal, and it seems like that is moving forward. And then there was also a stay from that lower court judge, staying the preliminary injunction, so potentially, theoretically, still allowing for that Iowa law to be enforced. But right now, that Iowa decision is being submitted to the 5th Circuit as persuasive evidence for why the 5th Circuit should strike down this Texas law, which is dealing with the border crisis. Now, currently, we're waiting for the 5th Circuit to decide on Texas SB4. They've already heard arguments on that, and that happened a couple months ago. But after that hearing, you have this case like the Iowa immigration decision and even other notable two-way decisions which are being submitted to the 5th Circuit to try to influence their decision. Recently, we've talked about how the Supreme Court's decision in Rahimi was submitted to the 5th Circuit. And then you also had the Missouri Second Amendment Preservation Act case, the SAPA case, which was decided by the 8th Circuit, that was also submitted to the 5th Circuit on this Texas SB4 issue. When it comes to the Missouri SAPA law, the Biden administration recently submitted that to the 5th Circuit, and they stated that in this case, the United States proceeds under the same equitable right of action as it did in Missouri. This court should reach the same conclusion as the 8th Circuit and should reject Texas' argument that the United States lacks a right of action. So they're using the Missouri SAPA law and the win that they got in the 8th Circuit to say that they have standing to bring this lawsuit against the Texas law here, which deals with immigration. And then when it comes to the Rahimi Supreme Court decision, that two-way case, the state of Texas is actually the ones bringing that to the 5th Circuit, and they argue that this court should not repeat the district court's error on appeal. Plaintiffs have failed to show that the federal law preempts SB4 at all, let alone in every application. As Texas has explained, SB4 mirrors and supplements federal statutes. It does not conflict with them. Regardless, because the Constitution trumps statutory law, SB4 can be applied pursuant to Texas' self-defense authority, their right to self-defense, and they have the right to protect themselves under this Texas law. Texas argues that since SB4 can be constitutionally applied in some aspect, the universal relief that was granted by the lower court should be struck down by the 5th Circuit. So these are very interesting developments when it comes to the Texas border dispute and this lawsuit here with SB4. There have been a lot of arguments that have been going on. There's arguments about the impact of Rahimi. There's arguments about the impact of the Missouri SAPA law, the Second Amendment Preservation Act law there. And then now you have the impacts of this Iowa decision dealing with a very similar border law, immigration law that was decided by a federal district court and is currently up for appeal in the 8th Circuit. So very interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how all these sway the 5th Circuit. And as things develop, if we get any more information, I will let you guys know. So if you guys like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm, and it signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of two-way news. But as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And don't forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.